Today's video, we are going to talk about irregular verbs conjugations. So, in German, most verbs follow a regular pattern in the present tense, but some verbs called irregular verbs or unregelmäßige Verben change their stem when conjugated. The important thing to understand is that this change in the stem happens only with personal pronouns du and er, sie, es. So, in case of ich or I or we or you, in those cases, it doesn't change. There is no change in the conjugation. The only change that happens in the verb stem is in the case of do or er, sie, es. But first, let's talk about let's rehearse the regular verb conjugation. So in my previous video, we talked about regular verb conjugation where we mentioned or we discussed that the stem of the verb do not change. The stem of the verb doesn't change. You merely have to add e or st or t or en based on the personal pronoun that you use. For instance, in case of ich, the verb stem stays the same. You just have to add e at the end. In case of do, you have to add st. In case of er, die, es, you have to add t. In case of wir, ihr, or sie, you have to add en, t, or en respectively. Overall, indicating that the stem of the verb, in this case, spiel, stays the same. You just have to add these words at the end. Please watch the previous video. There I went in detail on that. In case of irregular verbs now, the stem, within the stem, we have certain changes. And these changes that happen only happens in those two forms. In the other forms, those changes do not happen in the verb stem. So in detail, let's look into it. The first type of change that happens is in the verb stem, and this you have to remember by heart which verb is irregular in the present and which verb is not. The verbs that are irregular in the present, their e, for instance, in case of sprechen, the e in the stem of the verb will change into I. And this change will happen only for two personal pronouns, du and er, sie, es. So for instance, ich spreche, du sprichst, er, sie, es spricht. And the rest, ich, wir, ihr, sie, will stay the same just like with the regular verb. So ich spreche, the verb stem sprech will stay the same, you just have to add e. Wir, sprech stays the same, you have to add en, the same for ihr and sie. So the only change that happens is for two personal pronouns, du and er, sie, es. Just that you remember. That means you have to know by heart which verb is irregular in the present and which verb is not. Now I'm talking about irregular in the present. This is because some verbs might be irregular in the present, but in the past and the perfect tense, they will be regular. So German language in this sense is a bit tricky. So this you have to remember by heart. But just that you know that in some verbs, in case of sprechen, for instance, the change in the verb stem happens in the vowels e. So for instance, the e will change into I. Now some other examples of this type of change, e converting into I for irregular verbs in the present, is for geben, helfen, nehmen, and essen. For instance, geben in the case of du will change into gibst, helfen in case of du will change into hilfst, nehmen, nimmst, essen, is. Similarly, the same verbs in case of er, sie, es will be gibt, hilft, nimmt, and ist. Now example sentences are du gibst mir das Buch, you give me the book. Nimmt den Bus, he takes the bus. Sie isst eine Pizza, she eats a pizza. The second type of change that happens into irregular verbs in the present tense in German is that the verb stem which contains e, that e in the verb stem will change into ie. For instance, in case of sehen and again, these irregular verbs you have to know by heart that these are irregular. Why? Because this e could also be within a regular verb. and there it will not change. So you have to know by heart that this verb is irregular, and if the verb is irregular, then you have to see that the E in that verb might change into IE. So in that case also, the change will only happen in those two personal pronouns in case of du and er, sie, es. For instance, sehen will change into ich sehe. There will be no change. It will stay the same like a regular verb. Just e at the end will be added to the stem of the verb se. But the stem of the verb se, in case of those two pronouns, du and er, sie, es, will change into siehst, er, sie, es, sieht. So the change is happening, is converting or getting converted to IE. Again here also. And for the plural forms, it will stay the same. So only for the ish and the plural form will stay the same. For the second person singular as well as the third person singular, it will change. That means the change will be that in the stem of the verb, the E will get converted into IE. Another example is lesen. So in case of lesen, in case of do, you see least. In case of ERZS, least. Example sentences are du siehst den Film, you see the movie. Liest ein Buch, he reads a book. The third type of change is that A, or in German A, will change into A. And this change in some irregular verbs in German is common only also in the present tense. For instance, fahren will change in case of the second person singular as well as the third person singular into fährst oder fährt. And first person singular ich or the plural forms wir, ihr, sie, they will have no change. That means the change that will happen in the conjugation will be the same as it will happen in the regular case. So the only change that happens is within the second person singular as well as in the third person singular. Other examples are schlafen und tragen, to sleep or to carry or to wear. That will, schlafen will convert into schläfst in case of du form or the second person singular, and in case of the third person singular, it will convert into schläft. Similarly, tragen will get converted in case of the second person singular du into trägst, and the third person singular es into trägt. Example sentences for that are du schläfst lange, you sleep long. Sie trägt eine Jacke, she wears a jacket. In summary, as mentioned, most German verbs are regular verbs. That means they follow the similar pattern, est, ten, ten. This is added at the end of the verb stem. The verb stem stays the same. But the irregular verbs mainly are changing for do and as. I'm mentioning the word mainly because some irregular verbs also change. In the verb stem, the change is also happening for ish, but most of them are only changing in case of the second person singular and in the third person singular. And that change I'm talking about is only for the present tense. The three types of changes that are happening are E is getting converted into I, again, E is getting converted into IE, and A is getting converted into another A with umlauts, which is pronounced as A. Mini practice quiz, you can do this at home. If you would like to understand this better, and put it in the comment below under this video, and I will then mention it to you if you did it correctly or not, but you don't have to do it. If you would like to know this better, I would really highly recommend that you do this. So we have three verbs that are irregular by nature: essen, fahren, und sehen. And these are the sentences. Do, then you have to know that the conjugation is do and er. That means the verb stem will change. There will be a vowel change in it. What is it? Please mention it here. Write it down in the comments. And fahren as well. Do and er. Second person singular, third person singular, there will be a change. Which conjugation is fitting here? Please mention it. And the same goes for sehen, for second person singular and third person singular. Put it in the comment below, and I will definitely tell you if you are doing it correctly or wrong. Subscribe for more